rabbit hole recently, and I went pretty deep into this rabbit hole, and I was shocked at some of the things I found out along the way. I don't know if you guys have heard of Wade Wilson. He was the guy that was recently on trial after he unalived two different women. When I first started looking into him, I was shocked because when I looked him up on YouTube, it was a lot of like the Law and Crime Network, and then a whole rabbit hole of his jail phone calls, which we'll get into that later. And then when I went to TikTok and searched his name, the response and videos I was seeing were completely different. They're all thirst traps of all these girls talking about, mama, I'm in love with a criminal. Oh my gosh, if he was out here in the streets, I would be dead. And I'm like, what the hell is wrong with these women? Here's what this dude did, for those of you guys who don't know. Back about 6 years ago, he was dating this girl. He just got out of jail. He was only 5 days out of jail. And he ended up getting in this big fight with the girl he was dating and took off with her car. And he kept blowing his girlfriend up from all these different phone numbers, and he wanted to meet up with her, and she was scared because she said that he had brutally beat her in the past and R-word her and all kinds of other crazy stuff. But she wanted to get her car back, so she met him at her job, and she thought, okay, at least people from my job can look out for me. And when he pulls up, he immediately tried to grab her by her dress and pull her inside the car, and he was doing everything in his power to get her in the car, and she refused to get in. And then he ended up brutally beating her in the parking lot, and she finally was able to get away by running for her life to a business right next to her job. And the cops were eventually called, and he dipped out. Oh, and I completely left out the part where when he pulled up, he wasn't even in her car, and he didn't have a car. He had some black car that his girlfriend had never seen before, and she got away, and he ended up leaving. And come to find out, that car he was driving was a girl that he ended up meeting at the bar after he got in a fight with his girlfriend, and this girl let him come back home with her, and while she was sleeping, he decided to strangle her to death, and then ended up stealing her car, and then went and tried to, I guess, kidnap his girlfriend, and luckily she got away. And then after that, he went and was driving, and some lady was walking down the street, and he asked her for directions and asked her if she needed a ride. And as soon as she got in the car, he started taking off. He strangled her, and then when he was trying to throw her out of the car, she was still breathing, so he threw her out in the street, and he said he ran over her about 100 times until she looked like spaghetti. And he even admitted this on a jail call with his father, and of course that was played in court, and the father admitted to all this stuff too, and the jail calls are out there on YouTube if you want to look them up. He's admitted in jail phone calls with his ex-girlfriend that he did these crimes, and there is an overwhelming amount of evidence against him. So just a few days ago, he was found guilty of these crimes and sentenced to death, and his one request was for them to put him to death as soon as possible. Even after all that, there's still people writing hard for him on TikTok, on Twitter, all kinds of different social media platforms, and there's even different fundraisers. This fundraiser right here has a $100,000 goal, and so far he's raised $1,207 between 57 different donors. And here's another fundraiser where there's been $73,856 and over 91 supporters. And those supporters, some of them had to put up quite a bit of money. I just cannot believe that people are doing this after he's already admitted to doing this and supporting that. And I feel like all this money that's being raised to try to figure out how to get him free, and for all these different lawyers to have all these appeals, I feel like that money should be going to the family employees, not to him. He's already been getting quite a bit of money from different females and males while he's been in prison. There's hella phone calls. I don't know how these people are getting them, but they're getting all his phone calls he's having with people in prison. He has phone calls with his ex where he's constantly begging her for $20 here and there. And there's even times where she's saying she's going to cut him off because she's tired of him asking her for money. And then he'll be saying, oh, I love you so much, baby. I want to be with you forever. You're my one and only. And then literally the next day he's on the phone with like some older 55-year-old man telling him he loves him and that they're going to get married. It just seems like he will tell anybody whatever they want to hear as long as they put some money on his books and he can get him some canteen. Like, there's been different girls that have been exposed for talking to him through the jail phone calls. Like, one girl was called Christine. People were calling her Canteen Christine. And now there's Canteen Joey out here putting money on his books. But I guess he has a thing for guys too. I guess there's word on the street that the first time he was in prison, he was allegedly part of some like white gang and they kicked him out because they caught him in his cell having sex with another man. And I guess that's very frowned upon in prison gangs, especially the one that he claims that he was in. There's even one girl that was talking to him that sounded like she was head over heels in love with him. And then not long after they were talking, like months later, she was suddenly found in the woods dead. And I guess they believe that she was kidnapped. I mean, not by Wade because he was in prison, obviously, but it seems like she was just too trusting with the wrong people and sadly eventually paid the price for that. Multiple ex-girlfriends have came forward and exposed him, and Jelly Roll's wife Bunny, she has a podcast and she actually is working on a documentary right now with Wade Wilson and all his victims, and this is a documentary that's going to be filmed and they're hoping to eventually sell it to Netflix. So I'm not sure when that's going to be coming out, but they've definitely been starting the process to get the ball rolling on all that, and they've gathered all the victims and talked to them. Nobody was surprised at all when they found out that he did these crimes and took these women's lives. His father spoke out on at the trial and has done several different YouTube and TikTok lives. And here's the situation with the father. He ended up getting Wade's mom pregnant when he was only 15 and she was 14. And they were like way too young. They weren't ready for a child. And Wade's dad ended up having to go to juvie for like 9 months. And while he was in juvie, Wade's mom ended up sending him some paperwork for Wade to be adopted because she was unable to handle it. She found a nice couple from her church that really wanted to have a baby boy, and this was a perfect fit for him. So they ended up adopting Wade, and I guess they're wealthy, and Wade had a really good childhood from what everyone around him said. And Wade's father didn't talk to Wade again until he was 18. Then Wade suddenly started reaching out, and his father could tell that Wade was on some heavy drugs just by the way he was acting and talking. And his father said that it quickly turned into a relationship where every single time Wade would call him, he would be asking for money. And his dad felt bad because he missed all these years and he wanted to make up for lost time. So he was constantly buying him Ubers, buying him hotel rooms, buying him tires, sending him money whenever he needed it. And then later found out that he was spending the money on drugs. He was out here doing cocaine, doing crack, doing meth, and then he was becoming very paranoid when he would do these drugs. He tried to blame him being under the influence of meth on why he unalived these women, on top of him just wanting to do it. And the father said, look, over the years, I had so many girlfriends reach out to me just desperate for help because Wade would not stop putting hands on them. And the father said that he even told his girlfriend that he knew it was only a matter of time before Wade ended up taking one of these women's lives. The father called him out and said that he's pretty much a coward. He won't act this way towards no man or get all tough or try to put hands on no man. But when it comes to women, he has no problem putting hands on them and just treating them like dirt. And he really feels like his son has some kind of deep-rooted hatred towards women. This is his confession to police, and I am going to have to kind of censor some of these words just because of YouTube guidelines. But it says 3 days after defendant's arrest, a.k.a. Wade's, he told an officer at the jail that he wanted to speak to detectives. So they traveled to the jail to take a post-Miranda statement from Wade. He told the detectives, "I'll show you where Diane's body is. You hook me up with a cheeseburger and some french fries." And the detectives were like, it's not that simple. And then next thing you know, he just starts telling them a full-on confession. He ended up admitting that he unalived both women. He stated that he picked Ruiz up after asking her to show him how to get to the local high school. And he said that he was going to drop her off, but I knew in my mind I wasn't going to drop her off. When she tried to get out of the car, he grabbed her and choked her out until she couldn't breathe anymore. But she wasn't fully unalived yet. When he had his hands around her throat, next thing you know, her purse fell out of the car, and he ended up driving to a random area to dispose of her body, but she came back to life 3 or 4 times, and he said she was a fighter, that's for sure, I'll give her that. And then he pushed her out of the car, and she tried to get up, and I ran her over with the car, and I ran her over maybe like 10, 20 times. And he told his dad 100 times, but he told the detectives 10 to 20. And he said her head, her body, I ran it over with the vehicle till she was not moving anymore, and everything was just disfigured, her whole body, and she couldn't get up because she was dead for sure. And then I left. This is just a sick mofo right here. Oh my gosh, it makes my stomach queasy just talking about it. Then he tried to act like her and him ended up hooking up and it was consensual. I'm not buying it, and neither were the detectives, because it just did not add up with the timeline that they had. And then he says, you know, I used my charm, I used my good looks, that's what I did with the first girl, and that's how I got in her head, and look what happened to her. Same story, because I just used my looks and I'm wrong for that. And here he is doing the same exact thing while he's in prison, trying to get all these girls to put money on his canteen. And he claimed that he had run over her 10, 20 times. The detectives weren't buying it that it was that many times, because they said it did not match up with the evidence they had. Even the dad said he was quite the storyteller and always exaggerating things, and the police felt like he was just inflating the facts in this case. And then he stated that he ended up taking this woman's life because he was on a rampage at this point and he was on drugs. And he said he fled Mateo Graphics. He was hiding in some palm trees across the street, and he watched the police search the building for several hours because they were trying to find him. And he said he left and he broke into Fanny Amlin's home, where he called his father and was eventually arrested. And he was initially trying to get his father to come get him, and his father said that he was initially grabbing his shoes and putting his clothes on to rush down there and get him. Then he sat back and he's like, wait a minute. If he is doing what I think he did, then I probably don't want to get involved in this. And luckily he changed his mind. He then talked about the other girl whose life he took, and he told the officers he met her at a bar. He went up to her, he bagged her, and then he was bragging about how he went to this dude's house and ended up hooking up with her. And after they went back to her house afterwards, this other friend that was with this girl left, and then they continued to hook up, and then he claims he took her life. He said afterwards he wrapped her body up, he got in her car, and he went to see his girlfriend at the spa that he ended up, you know, trying to pull her in the car and ended up beating her brutally right outside the spa. He tried to say, oh, I would never take my girlfriend's life. I love her too much. But then he turned around and said, yeah, the reason I didn't is because there was too many people around. And if I had the chance, then I probably would have. And he said that he went to Cape Coral afterwards and he thought, you know what? I've already done it once. I'm going to do it again. He just figured this was his last hurrah and he was going to make the best of it. And he went out and found the second victim, and that's when he ended up taking her life and running her over. Even after all this, his ex-girlfriend continued to call him in prison and just kiki and caca with him all the time. Like, yes, there's times where she got onto him, and I feel like she was one of the few people that he was willing to hear out whenever they were trying to tell him about himself. But she was also constantly flirting with him in these phone calls. And at first, yeah, they were set up by police so the police could get more information. But then after that, she continued to reach out to him, knowing what he did to these other women. And she even admitted that she knows that he was trying to take her life that night. And the rest of the report says the only justification or explanation by Wade for his actions was that Jason Shepard kept giving him so many drugs. Okay, so he's a snitch too. You know, this little gang that he's claiming that he's banging now, they're not going to like that. They see this paperwork. And it goes on to say that he ended up getting drugs. He thought it was coke, but then he's like, I feel like it was bath salts or flakka because it just made me lose my mind. And there's another clock lie because he told his ex that it was dope, that he was doing some ice, but here he's claiming that he felt like it was bath salts. And he said that Melton's unaliving was not prompted by anything. He blamed it entirely on the fact that he was high, which just sounds like a easy cop-out. I'm not buying that because this has been a pattern with this man. Like, I'm sure being on drugs does not help and it's going to get you even more amped up, especially when you're not getting much sleep and if you're high on something that you claim that you don't enjoy because you thought you were getting something else than what you really got. But at the end of the day, there's plenty of people who do drugs every single day and don't take people's lives. And even after he did it the first time, say like you just accidentally do it the first time, which he admitted wasn't an accident, you turn around and still did it again. And I feel like he would have kept doing it until he was caught. And thank God they finally eventually caught him, but they should have had him arrested and in jail a long time ago, because the problem with Wade is he has been arrested over 20 times for so many different felonies and charges for putting his hands on people, and they just kept giving him a slap on the wrist and letting him back out into society when he was aggressive and a career criminal. The crazy part is there's an ex that has spoke out that was with him before. I'm not sure if she was right before the girl, you know, that was dating him before he got locked up, or how many girlfriends she was before that girl. But she said she dated him, I think it was back in either 2016 or 2018. She dated him for just a few months after she met him on Plenty of Fish. And just like all the other girls said, she fell in love with him over his looks. She's like, oh, he had dimples. You know, I thought he was so hot. You know, he looks like the crackhead version of G-Eazy. And even though he had nothing else to offer, he didn't have no job, he obviously had a drug habit, she still decided to let him move in a month later. And then eventually he was doing so bad, she said, look, you got to get in rehab. I'll help you figure something out. And at first, he wasn't accepted into this rehab because he didn't have insurance, because his parents had dropped his insurance. And then suddenly he's like, oh, I found a rehab, but it's 3 hours away. And she's like, I can't take you. I have no money. I don't get paid for a few days. And he ended up taking her car. And she got upset, and I guess eventually she got in the vehicle with him, and when she was in the vehicle with him, she got a call from her mom because her birthday was the next day. And I guess he was scared that she was going to tell her mom, you know, that he had pretty much stole her car. And at this point, he had already put his hands on her. So he ended up like tying her hands and feet and had her bound. He tied her hands and feet up with all these trash bags and all this different dirty laundry she had in her back seat because she was about to do laundry. And he severely beat her. He busted open her lip. Her whole face was black and blue. He had her driving around in the back seat and then moved her to the floorboard and was just driving her for hours. And he eventually said, look, I'll drop you off, but I'm gonna have to tie you to a tree and leave you. And she's like, okay, that's good, I can just get away after that. But then he's like, yeah, but if I leave you here at the tree, I'm gonna have to knock you out first. She didn't feel comfortable doing that, so he ended up letting her stay in the backseat of the car as long as she was tied up. And eventually he's like, look, I'm gonna go meet up with one of my friends. And she's like, well, isn't it gonna look weird if I'm tied up in the back of the car all bruised and bleeding? He's like, yeah, you're right, get in the front seat, and when I pull up to my friend, don't look at her. And eventually he pulled up to this gas station. He gets out with his backpack and he leaves with this girl and gave this girl her keys to her car back. And she just beelined for hours straight to her parents' house. And then her parents immediately called the police. She ended up making a police report. They had DNA evidence on this man. They had pictures. I think there was like 17 different pictures they took of all the bruises and injuries from this man, and they even like swiped underneath her fingernails. They had all kinds of compelling evidence, and they did not move forward with the charges. Just imagine if they would have moved forward with those charges and found him guilty of those charges, then he could have been in prison and these two women would still be with us today. Like, this man got away just so many different times, and now this girl is looking at trying to sue the police department. And okay, so this is the rest of the paperwork from the court. I guess they ended up doing some brain testing, and they did cover this in the trial. And it says that Wade was paranoid about the police watching what he was doing, and during the testing, Wade was unable to draw a cube or an accurate clock face, which I'm not fully buying that. I maybe he doesn't know how to draw a cube or a clock face, but he has even admitted in phone calls with his ex, because his ex was like, oh my god, I'm never gonna see you again, why are we even wasting our time talking to each other? And he's like, don't worry baby, I'm gonna get out, I'm gonna plead reason of insanity. He also showed horizontal nystagmus in his eyes, cogwheeling in the movement of his right arm, and reduced reflexes in his arms and legs. And the doctor interpreted these results as showing some degree of brain impairment, although cogwheeling is also present in people who take or have taken antipsychotic medication. And then the doctor admitted that he was not even certified to conduct the testing that he administered on the defendant, but he felt like his brain was not impaired enough for them to use that as some kind of defense in the trial and claim, oh, he's not fully there, so that's why he did this. Either way, I'm glad this man is never getting out of prison again, unless he is able to escape. He's already tried to escape once. Him and his old cellmate try to break a window in the county jail he was in, and they ended up getting caught. He ended up getting more charges as a result of that, and I'm sure once he is in prison, I think he's just in the county jail now that he's in trial. I think he'll be going to prison now. I feel like he's going to be in a maximum security prison due to him trying to escape. He hasn't had good experiences in prison in the past. He got in a fight where he got a scar underneath his eye. He's been beat up severely several times. And like the dad said, he don't know how to handle being around men. He just likes to take advantage and hurt women. But that is it for this video, guys. If you guys want to hear more about my deep dive and about some of his phone calls and some of the crazy other things that came out about this man, let me know. I just had to cover this because I could not believe all the damn thirst traps I was seeing over this freaking sick. A quick little update. I did look it up, and Wade has officially been transferred to prison. He left the county jail he was at 1:45 in the morning and transferred to the Florida Department of Corrections in Tallahassee, Florida. So he's officially in prison now, and I wonder how that's going to go for him, and if the phone calls are still going to be able to be accessed and, you know, be posted online. Prayers for the families of these victims. I tried to see if I could find like a fundraiser for the families, but I could not find one. If you guys know of one, let me know in the comments. But give this video a thumbs up. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Subscribe, and thank you so much for watching.